Thank you so much for the invitation to the Living Cities Forum in Melbourne. My name is Eva Pfannes from OOZE, a practice that I started together with my partner Sylvain Hartenberg in 2003 in Rotterdam. We operate on different scales between art, architecture and urbanism, and at the core of our practice is how to integrate nature and natural cycles in our cities to help us deal with the challenges that we face today, such as climate change, pollution on a broad scale, but also the fact that we don't understand anymore where our resources come from and how we should deal with them on a personal level in a more sustainable way. So we try to make processes that are usually happen outside the city, bring them back into the city, make them visible, enjoyable. So we, for instance, we deal with water, having too little, too much or too polluted water. And we try to see how we can actually change these processes so that they happen right next to where we live. So I'm going to show a large project today that we work on since 5 years in Chennai with a local team and with a team in the Netherlands. It's a bilateral program from the Dutch government called Water as Leverage. And we will look at how we can actually decentralize solutions that are usually happening outside the city, bring them back, so collect, treat and store water within the city so that it can be brought up again for consumption. And I'm going to show another project that I'm standing in front of, Future Island, that we designed and created together with our partner for art projects, Majtica Potric, an artist from Slovenia. And Future Island is a conversation piece around climate change. Half of the island is heated to 5 degrees so that we can understand and feel and actually touch and maybe understand more than from reading in papers, academic papers, that what climate change can be like, and that it's not only something that has to deal with mitigation alone, so bringing a lot of solar cells, wind farms, in short terms energy. But climate change also has to do with having too little water, with having to do with adaptation, that we have to learn how to adapt really fast, and that we might be able to learn something how nature has been able to adapt with climate change and climate catastrophes during the past 4,000 million years, in fact.
Thank you for the invitation to be part of Infrastructures for Life. I want to start with a quote of the great French philosopher Edgar Morin. Ideas both help us to get acquainted with the world, while on the contrary, preventing us from knowing it better. Ideologies can enslave us to ideas that we ourselves have created. Let's take a step back. In 1641, an idea of nature was defined that still very much influences us deep into our economic theories and consumption patterns today. Our view on nature was coined by Cartesian revolution in 1641 by René Descartes. I think, therefore I am. This brought about the mind-body dualism. The mind is everybody who thinks, mostly white men. The body is the extension of things, women, children, indigenous communities, and nature. Sauvage, meaning wild, got a negative connotation at that time. The term nature versus society is also this late 17th century concept. Society was invented in opposition to nature. During the rise of capitalism, this became a hard and fast separation and organizing principle. What is nature's value? Not even to speak of its spiritual value. Nature was and is actually taken for granted. You just need to claim it and extract it and cut it down, as it were. European civilization must become the master and possessor of nature, says Descartes. Francis Bacon, the founder of experimental science, went even further as to say society should dominate nature. It must torture nature's secrets out of her. This worldview helped spur major transformations, an either-or binary thinking, which again leads to the essentialist conception of things rather than relational thinking, and the domination of nature through science as a social good. And this worldview allowed and still allows for an economic model focused on permanent economic growth. This figure here shows a so-called circular flow model, which is the first model of the overall economy that prospective economists and students see when they start economic course in school or at university. The model shows the flow of money through the economy with businesses, households, and the market relationship of the two being center stage. What is remarkably absent from this model is nature, which seems to be irrelevant to the generation of welfare and the concept of scarcity that economics as a discipline is supposedly about. Resources produced by nature over millions of years can be harvested for free. Waste is dealt with as an externality. Outside to the economic model, equally waste has no cost. The result of this central focus on money and its representation in capital and labor is that any consideration of natural systems supporting the economy, such as land use and energy use, were and still are pushed to the periphery of economic thought. They only addressed if these externalities threaten this circular flow. Today, our way of reproducing human lives exceeds the ability of our planet to store our waste and reproduce itself, very clearly so. And so we start to see the backlash of how we interacted with nature. However, there's another model of economy that seems reasonable. In 2017, Kate Raworth proposed the model of an embedded economy, the so-called donuts economics. This approach recognizes that the creation of human welfare ultimately depends on the energy provided by the sun, the matter extracted from Earth, and the waste deposited on Earth. This embedded economic model opens the study of human welfare creation beyond narrow monetary views towards the importance of Earth and therefore nature's welfare for human welfare. What's different here is that nature is all around and the model is embedded within nature. As you can imagine, both economic models have produced different types of spatial models as well. The way a city looks and feels is also the expression of its underlying economic model and the expression of its interaction with nature. In our work, we position, therefore, nature-based interventions within the dynamic systems of nature and connect them to local cultures. Our designs support a circular relationship between nature and people, and we strive to build local prototypes for a collective future. We design solutions that deploy natural processes as a strategy to heal and repair the territory. Much of our work is about water and therefore water, blue-green infrastructure. It takes water as a resource. Water is very tangible. You can actually see it, taste it, you can play with it, and you can enjoy it. We look at what is needed to deal with the resource water within the city and make it part of the natural cycle. We're trying to make nature-based solutions understandable, beautiful, and attractive so that people can actually have access to it. And it's something that can also serve as a pedagogical tool, lead to upscaling, and also as something that you want to maintain and take care of. We realized a large number of those urban prototypes or demonstration projects so far. This one here is Agua Carioca in Rio de Janeiro, a closed-loop water system with a pilot in the Roberto Burle-Marx garden. Between the waters, in Germany, in the Ruhr region, is a micro closed-loop sewage treatment plant that renders wastewater drinkable and exposes all the elements needed in a diagrammatic way that is beautiful and understandable. We actually brewed beer from the wastewater treated with nature-based solutions, and created a place for the community to come together and enjoy. And in London, we created of soil and water the King's Cross Pond Club, which is the first public swimming pool without any chemicals, right in the center of the city, surrounded by 80 different wild plant species. 5,000 people signed a petition to keep it. And you see in front of you here 30 individuals who wrote a letter to the local council that they commit themselves to actually care for the pool and run it at their own expenses. And now, of course, after these sort of brief array of prototypes, the question is, how do we apply these concepts to a whole city? And I would like to share with you the case study that we're working on since 5 years in Chennai. It's called the City of Thousand Tanks. We work together with an amazing group of people that is mainly from Chennai in India, a city of 7 million people, and from the Netherlands. The Dutch government started a program led by the first water envoy, Henk Ovink, which is called Water for Resilient Cities, Water as Leverage for Resilient Cities Asia, in 3 different cities in Asia, in Chennai in India, in Khulna, Bangladesh, and Semarang in Indonesia. We are the team lead of one of the 2 teams that was chosen for Chennai. You see here our whole team. And I'm going to now basically run through the last 5 years. You see here the Indian subcontinent with all the watersheds that rain, actually all these water heats up as it crosses the subcontinent and it flows into the Bay of Bengal. And this leads to rain patterns like the monsoon, where it rains very hard for 2 months a year only. And in the past, this has been dealt with by actually solutions in plants, in soil. So actually constructing places in the countryside, but also in the city where this water can be absorbed and stored, which is what we call the solutions in heritage, which we found when we got into the theme. So this here is almost, this is a temple tank in section. It's almost like an inverted pyramid. It's cut into the ground and it allows all the water, the rain, to flow into it, to be stored during the monsoon. And then it slowly, over the course of 10 months, it infiltrates into the ground and it can be brought up and used with individual bore wells. When it's empty, it can be desilted and cleaned. And so this has been in place since centuries, but now the system is broken. We have a situation where floating in floods and fighting for drops in summers, so floods and droughts are disconnected in the city and show how the city is broken. Although water is in principle abundant in Chennai, the demand is less than the total rainfall on the footprint of the city. But we can see that those tanks actually, and these eries, so the lakes where water was stored, have been encroached by rapid city expansion with no understanding of these water bodies. 2/3 of Chennai are sealed, and therefore the ground cannot absorb. The temple tanks are staying empty. They have just a decorative function nowadays. And in this new context of climate change projections, where we have a rise of temperatures, less rainfall with more intensity, and a sea level rise, all this is further exacerbated. We also have in water, we have greenhouse gas emissions from water sourcing. So in 2018, it was such a drought that water had to be brought to the city by tanks, actually by lorries and by the train. And there is, from exposed sewage, you have methane emissions. Now, the default answer, and that brings me back to the theme of infrastructure and of large mega projects, which we sign off so quickly with huge investments. So the default answer to this drought and flood is desalination plants and stormwater drains. So stormwater drains take that water, bring it as quickly as possible out into the ocean, where it has to be brought back by desalination plants, which take a lot of energy. And the default answer for the pollution is sewage treatment stations that are outside our cities. So these are just some examples of the grey infrastructure that runs through our city, that it's actually, and that's not only the case, of course, for Chennai, but for most of our cities worldwide, it's what we have constructed, is a city that follows this model of creating externalities. It takes fresh water from one side and it spills it out on the other side, sometimes and mostly untreated with a lot of costs. And so we take and we throw it out. So the question is there a paradigm shift possible to a closed loop system where we actually take we take what we use and we give it back in the same way we received it. So the city starts to be a city that's giving a service to itself by integrating nature-based solutions within itself. So this system, we can also compare it to the metabolism of the city, to the metabolism of our own body. The system that creates these externalities is actually akin to a body with all the organs placed outside. Now we can see very easily how that is inefficient, how that takes even a lot of energy for extra transport, and how it would make so much more sense to integrate everything back into the body itself. And so we in our work, we actually strive to go from what is traditionally the contained city that depends on the relationship with its hinterlands to an isotropic city that's fractal and expandable and incorporates nature and solves problems locally. We can do that with nature-based solutions. So this here is a sort of toolbox that we created, where we see here on the left side, forest retention and natural wetland reserve. That's the sort of most pure form of nature-based solutions, with the goal to recharge the groundwater, the aquifer. And then we see how those solutions can be brought into the city by green roofs, but also by creating temporary spaces for collection that can be squares in the city or roads, that then the water can be treated with bioswales, with constructed wetlands, and we can create different type of tanks, historic tanks, new type of tanks, and naturalized river retention pockets. And here, a small comparison of what it takes to actually clean water in the southern hemisphere, where it's very warm in India, and we have a more or less constant temperature that's never below 20 degrees. It's about 1 square meter of constructed wetlands and half a cubic meter of a septic tank. And when we compare this to a traditional grey infrastructure, we see how that it's not only perhaps less costly, but that it's also much more attractive, and that it's maybe also more attractive to actually show where the money is spent on, because much of the grey infrastructure is absolutely invisible. And that has a lot of that draws with it a lot of other consequences, such as even corruption. We don't even see where the money is going. In Chennai, we want to use these nature-based solutions to go from a situation of scarcity to a situation of abundance. A situation from a business as usual, where we draw water from very far away, lakes, 200 kilometers, and desalination plants, and expel it partly untreated into the sea, to a solution where we shrink our footprint by 50% by actually treating water right there where it's produced with decentralized nature-based solutions and reusing them to keep the aquifer clean and stable, as well as all our natural water bodies. With this background, we developed this idea of 1,000 tanks. That's obviously not taken literally, but that looks at the city and how long it takes for rainwater to infiltrate, which is about 1 square kilometer during 1 year. So we want to construct in each, let's say, square kilometer, a number of tanks to reach a city of 1,000 tanks. That's cheaper to build and run, more environmentally friendly, has a tremendously smaller footprint, and is also more dependent on the very local ecosystem. We built a local prototype that was opened just 1 month ago in Chennai. It is called the Water Balance Pilot, in a school for blind and deaf children, around 4 hectares next to the Mambalam Canal. The school itself is like a sort of microcosmos of all the problems the city has with wastewater backflow and flooding. So in terms of solutions, we of course have the recharging rainwater solutions with wells that are constructed in different positions. And we have a treatment and recharging of wastewater. So that is something that is very innovative, that we treat water with wastewater, 27,000 liters per day from the entire school, with an anaerobic system and an aerobic system that I will show in the following. So the wastewater enters a settler and a septic tank, where actually the bacteria that are in our body help treating the water without any oxygen being involved and without any other chemicals being involved. And then we have here the constructed wetlands, 2 different fields of 180 square meter. We have a tank, and we have a discharge system. So you see here the grooves in the ground that then actually help watering a park in the center of the school, and the rainwater recharge wells. So here you can see the final version that we opened 1 month ago. The whole park is enjoyed, and it is also a pedagogical tool that shows to city officials and users alike that these solutions are applicable to almost any context. The reaction we got during the opening was, on the one hand, that of course the usual stuff, like it doesn't smell, it looks fantastic, but also that it's actually a sewage treatment plant is almost beyond belief. Like you can actually live next to it, and it's beautiful. And it's a system where the plants itself are irrigated by the pipes, so the water infiltrates the ground eventually. And also the water tests that we did turned out well. So we see here the minister for water supply, who is of course happy to open this pilot and use it, of course, to further promote alternative solutions that do exist. We see here the different wastewater collected during the different stages of treatment, and the water test that's up to the standard that it needs to be. And another part that we did here that is innovative in a way is to have a remote monitoring setup. So everybody can see this actually on their phone. You can log in, you can see how much water is collected, how much water is treated, and how much water is infiltrated in the aquifer. This functions like akin to a kind of solar power remote monitoring system. And with this system, people can actually incentivize. So how do we go from this local prototype to a systemic upscaling? How can we go from a water balance pilot that can be used for a flagship project in Mylapore to the whole city of 1,000 tanks, but that also can be used for an upscaling through the different schools in Chennai and in India? We look at the 4 different main targets: flood prevention, drought prevention, sanitation, and an improved urban environment. And next to the measures, the nature-based solutions that I already explained, you have also solid waste recycling and adaptive buildings. We then apply them to 4 different watersheds in the city to contribute to the overall idea of the city of 1,000 tanks. I will now illustrate how this works in one flagship project in Mylapore, historically and culturally significant core of the city, and how it looks when we apply those different nature-based solutions. And we see the city not only as a surface, but actually as a section, as a cut. And we think what's underneath the city with it when we design and redesign and actually repair the city. So from rainwater collection to treatment, to recharge, to construct water assets under the ground, to consumption, to bring it up with water treatment plants locally, we close the cycle. This leads to an improved urban environment around the temple, and it leads to a restored temple tank that can collect water. And it has a large potential for replicability. We see here 53 historic tanks with the same solution, with 1 million beneficiaries, with overall a 50 million liter per day possibility to recharge. This is calculated over the whole year, of course. And now we see here the different models. So we have housing sites, we have 40 industrial sites, we have different type of canals and watersheds. And with each type of project comes also a different ownership and operation model. We see here, for instance, the housing where we constructed not, of course, like a temple tank, but a sort of a deeper playground that functions as a tank that can be filled during the monsoon and serve as this local water body. So we see this sort of dynamic temporary landscape in the city. And how do we upscale in time, which is so important? How do we get this sort of vision into the future to get from where we are now, from a pre-feasibility and feasibility with exactly these prototypes and pilots, to construct these flagships and the pioneers, and to become eventually a city norm? So we do this by what we call the project program approach, where everything we do along the way is actually feeding back in the overall program of the city of 1,000 tanks. So we construct several feedback loop moments. And now I would like to illustrate a little bit the benefits for the collective future of these nature-based solutions. We have, of course, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, that touch so much more than just water itself. We have social benefits. We have benefits that are economic, that are also for street vendors, that can be engaged in job creation, in the maintenance of the system. And we have a gender-sensitive development. So here we illustrate the citywide benefits that look at property, enabling business, health, and water savings that lead up to a total savings of almost $1 billion per year. And what is interesting is that when we presented this solution to the banks, actually right now nobody is interested so much in the savings, because actually we want to, the economic model actually wants to sell things. The people who are interested in savings are the actual users. So we also see that the whole system needs to be reconstructed in a different way, and that local ownership makes sense in that way. To construct a water balance model that actually takes into account an increased urban demand, and that where we clearly see that only by reusing the sewage that is produced 24/7, we can create these so important groundwater assets. We can compare operational costs that are, of course, better with a system that involves nature, because nature, as it were, does all these treatments for free. We just need to give it space in the city. We look at decreased carbon emissions with the water balance model for the same reason. The plants, when they grow, they sequester carbon. Now I want to show the comeback to Future Island that we saw in the beginning, where we constructed an experimental landscape. That is another type of prototype. It's a conversation piece for a collective future. Future Island is our first permanent artwork that we designed together with Majtica Potric, an artist with whom we collaborate on these projects since 15 years. We were invited by curator Lotta Mossum from the State Art Agency in Sweden for Akademiska Hus, a state developer in Stockholm, to construct an artwork that will be situated in the landscape of a newly constructed campus, the Albano campus in the north of Stockholm. And when we arrived 7 years ago, this is what we found: an amazing heap of granite rock. And we were immediately captivated by it. The rock is like the rock in Sweden, one of the oldest rocks on the planet, is 1.8 billion years old. And it sort of clashes with our reality right now, which is climate change, where the predictions for especially the north of Europe are much harsher than anywhere else. So we brought the two together, and in this new landscape, we constructed an island made of these rocks that were put aside, stored for us, and we could bring them back. And then we drilled half of the rocks to construct an island where half of the island is 5 degrees warmer than the other side. So somehow the future that is possible in the do-nothing scenario, and the future that we hold in our hands to keep temperatures as they are close to what they are right now, are actually side by side. So we heat part of the island, the north part, to +5 degrees. We do that with a heating system that is under the ground. Some parts in Sweden, streets are actually heated, so it's sort of similar to that. And then some clusters of rocks are also drilled. They connected to a heat pump, which is connected to photovoltaic cells on the roof of the campus. And so here are some parts of the construction where you see that this landscape, which right now looks as if it's always been there, was actually somehow constructed back stone by stone with the help of an amazing team of contractors that with their skills helped us to understand how to construct nature, how to reconstruct nature with rocks that are 10 tons each. We took many, many weeks, and actually every stone you see here has been touched and deliberately put in a place. You see here the rocks that have been drilled, connected with pipes that are insulated. So then they become warm to the touch, and they will heat up gradually the environment. The island sort of comes back. It's almost like a relic of an ancient time that's found there. And over the next 100 years, we will see how these different futures evolve side by side. We planted with scientists from the Stockholm University the same type of species everywhere on the island. We have mosses and lichens that are 500 million years old already, as a species, of course, that is. And so we will now observe with the Science House together how this evolves in the near future. So it's a sort of conversation piece that people imagine a different future, that people can touch it, they can feel it. And when we were invited for the Venice Biennial in 2021 to show this piece, we actually thought about what will actually happen when we go into the future, and therefore what has happened actually in the past. So when you think about the future, you think what has happened in the past. You see here one stone that is now part of the island. It was a prototype that traveled to Venice. And you see here a logarithmic timeline, a temperature timeline of our planet Earth. On the left, you see the beginnings 4.5 billion years ago. And you see that Earth has been many times hotter than now, 5 times, 5 extinctions, 5 mass extinctions, 5 catastrophes so far. You see that and sort of when you get into this theme, you understand that what the planet will always be here somehow. What will change is the species. With each mass extinction, the species disappear, other species come up, they adapt. So adaptation is actually not something passive, but it's actually an active creation that we now also have to engage with, as we used fire on a daily basis during the last 200,000 years. That's exactly where we have to adapt and say that's actually stupid, because other species on the planet used photosynthesis since 2 billion years to get by. So there's many aspects that we can learn from looking back in history, how other species were able to adapt, and how we can actually turn our economic system around to become, instead of trampling nature with our feet and sort of always leave it at the bottom of the pyramid, to cherish it and have nature as the main stakeholder. We have to help. This is sort of constructing the only future that is possible, because as Johan Rockström put it, we have to be nature positive. If we live in a world with a hotter climate, if in this hotter climate we also have less capacity of nature, if we have more pollution, if we have less water, it won't be possible to deal with it. So I hope that in this way we can stay agents, and as designers and urbanists, we can become agents in helping to construct this new alternative future. Thank you.